In today's session, Cristhofer, Romeo, Muñoz, Jing, Nghik, and Innocent Wafula will take us through use Watchlist to manage alerts, reduce alert fatigue, and improve SOC efficiency. Cristhofer, Jing, and Innocent are all program managers with the Microsoft Sentinel team, and without further ado, I'll turn it over to them. Guys, the floor is yours.
All right, welcome everyone. Thanks again for being part of this webinar to cover more about how watches can help you manage and reduce the alert fatigue across your SOC. I think it's a no-brainer for all of us to understand that right now times are very uncertain, and for that reason, this definitely presents a bigger challenge for the Security Operations Center to stay on top of every incident and to also investigate and defend against security breaches. One of the most important goals that we want to focus on for this webinar is that a security operations center, it needs more optimization, it needs more efficiency. That's why having a laser focused approach on how we can be able to enrich and also prioritize incidents is definitely one of the critical use cases that we want to cover today. Now, with Watchlist is one of the out-of-the-box features out of Microsoft Sentinel. You are able to correlate data from any data source, and you could provide that from within the events in your Microsoft Sentinel environment. What this does is that this allows an entry point for you to be able to bring in any third-party data source to be able to correlate that against detection rules, threat hunting, and also response playbooks as well. Here on this slide, we have 4 use cases that we're going to really tap into today. And the first one is how are we able to prioritize incidents? With so many incidents coming in day out throughout a security operations center, how do we focus on what matters? So the whole theme behind this is how do we become more laser focused, and how do we respond to incidents that we know those entities are definitely a high value asset to the organization. Working our way towards the right-hand side of the slide here, we have also how do we actually import business data? How do we import the amount of users or employees that are terminated? How do we import data based off those that are part of the executive team? Importing that business data is really going to allow the SOC analysts to understand the criticality of the incidents that are being triggered and also raised throughout the Security Operations Center. This also allows us to understand that, we have these different entities that we have to have, onto our radar. How do we actually make sure that every single time that the incident or any sort of alert in respect to those entities are actually triggered or elevated, and then on top of that, how do we actually add some sort of enrichment when it comes to threat hunting or response as well to automate the process? We all know how frustrating it is to keep getting the same alerts or on entities or known sources that that you expect that behavior to occur. So one of the biggest use cases that watches can actually help with or satisfy is actually reducing that alert fatigue. I think all of us have heard this phrase countless of times, but it still remains a common problem across the Security Operations Center. Our security analysts, they're bombarded with the amount of false positives that actually come through the pipeline, which only adds more time to the triaging and also investigation process. I think all of us know more about, the MTTR, the MTTA. These are critical metrics that every SOC has to know of, and one of the ways that we're able to reduce those numbers is by actually reducing the alert fatigue. So within Watchlist allows you to bring in, again, data from external data sources so that you'll be able to suppress alerts from those known sources where these type of events or those type of alerts are expected to occur. Lastly, we have here, how do we actually enrich the event data? By bringing in external data sources. Maybe it may be a list of IPs, maybe it may be a list of critical devices or high value assets that you want to bring in just to add that more confidence or that confirmation to those different entities. These are the 4 top use cases that we're going to cover today when it comes to watches and how watches can help you satisfy that, again, to bring that laser focused approach when it comes to incident prioritization, bringing external data, especially those that are critical to the business, reducing the alert fatigue, and of course, adding that more confidence and more confirmation. With that being said, I'll pass it on to Innocent to go more in depth when it comes to these 4 use cases.
Thanks, Chris. And let's jump right into the scenarios. In this first use case, we shall look at how SOC analysts can leverage watchlists to become even more efficient in prioritizing incidents. A bit of context to our scenario here. We have a list of critical hosts that we classify as high-value assets in our environment. We upload this list into Microsoft Sentinel watchlist, and we want high-priority incidents to be generated whenever a publicly exploitable vulnerability is detected that applies to any of our critical hosts. Once an incident is generated, we can take a range of subsequent actions, such as increasing the severity level of the incident, assigning it to a critical incident team, or isolating the host from the network altogether. Now, this scenario depends on the presence of vulnerability data snapshots in your log analytics workspace ingested from a threat and vulnerability management tool, such as Microsoft Defender for Endpoint or third-party tools. All right, let us now look at how you as a SOC engineer would step through the process of importing the list of high-value assets into a Microsoft Sentinel watchlist. And so you navigate to the watchlist blade in the Microsoft Sentinel portal. You download the high-value asset or watchlist CSV template, populate that template with your critical hosts, and upload it back into Sentinel, and you should end up with a watchlist that looks like what we have within the yellow boundary of this rectangle. Next, what you want to do is to either create an analytics rules from scratch, or you can use a template that meets your needs. And once you do that and activate the rule will begin to run on the defined schedule. And if it matches any events with hosts specified in the high-value asset watchlist, then a high-severity incident is generated. Since we not only want to detect, but also to respond, Microsoft Sentinel gives us that capability with the automation rules feature. In this case, a series of playbooks defined within the automation rule, such as creating a ServiceNow ticket or even sending a text message to an on-call resource, since we consider the incident to be of high severity, will be executed. It's demo time. So we are going to move over to the Sentinel portal and do a quick walkthrough of this scenario. So here I am at the watchlist blade. As you can see, I've got a number of watchlists already defined over here. They are watchlists defined using the out-of-the-box templates, and also watchlists that have been built without using the templates as the basis. So over here, we have the templates themselves. So we have the high-value asset one, we have identity correlation, network address, service accounts, terminated employees, and VIP users. Now, the key thing with these templates and why I would encourage their usage is that if there are any entities that are picked up by our UEBA engine, because these templates integrate tightly with the UEBA engine. And so if they pick up any entities that have been populated within any of these templates, then they will be surfaced as insights in the entity pages or even in the investigation graph. So that gives you more context as you perform your triage or perform your investigation, and we shall see how that looks like in the second scenario. The other thing with these templates is that they come with a predefined schema, so you can't change the schema, and the details of that is covered in our documentation. So if you want to know what kind of schema is in these templates, you can check out there. And also, each of these schemas also contains or comes with a mandatory specification of fields. So if you're going to use any of these templates, you would have to populate certain fields. So for this particular use case here, we are focusing on the high-value asset one. So if you download that template, you should then end up with one that looks something like this. As you can see, I have already highlighted the mandatory fields for this particular schema. So the asset type is mandatory, the asset ID is, as well as the asset FQDN. The other thing with the templates is that when you use this template, for this particular case, the asset FQDN will automatically be defined as the search key. And the search key is what we use to actually perform those correlations by looking at the contents of the watch list and comparing that with the contents of the logs and then performing that correlation. So let us now take a look at our rule here that we are going to use. Yes?
Can we zoom in just a little bit?
Okay.
Thank you.
That's 150. All right, no worries. Okay, so let's jump onto our rule here. This is a custom rule we built, the high severity vulnerability detected on HVA, high value asset. So let's take a sneak peek into the KQL query that is powering this rule. First thing we do over here is we use this _getWatchlist function to extract the contents of the watch list and store it in a variable here that we've chosen to call watchlist. We then project the search key, and then further down here, we extract the host from the alert, and then we append the domain to the host name, because when they come in the alert, they do not have the FQDN attached to it. And as you can remember, the asset FQDN is our search key. So that's the key or the field we shall be using to compare. And we want to make sure that we are comparing apples to apples. So in this case, we are appending this domain here. So it matches the contents of what we have in the watch list. Then we go and look into our snapshot data. So this is where our snapshot data is in our custom table. And we are checking whether any of the hosts we got from this alerts show up in our vulnerability snapshot. And if they do, we go to a second step and we check what is the severity level of this vulnerabilities. If it is high, then we and we have those hosts showing up in our watch list, then it means we expect to have some hits. And we can check whether that is indeed the case by executing the query. And if it eventually comes up, we should have hits over here. It does come up eventually. So we will move on to the next phase where we have the incident generated. And now what we wanted to do is to check out the automation rule. So this is the automation rule that we've created, and we have attached it to our analytics rule over here. And here's where we can take a range of actions, depending on what the watch list picked up. So we can assign that incident to a particular analyst that's competent to deal with these sorts of incidents. We can then go ahead and execute another playbook that would send out the SMS alert by connecting to a service such as Twilo. And next, we can also add a tag to this incident, so we can elevate its visibility, its prominence across the SOC, so it can be easily tracked. The other thing we can do, of course, is create that ServiceNow ticket using this playbook. And then we can also send out an email to the head of the SOC or some other senior individual requesting their confirmation as to whether we should actually go ahead and isolate the machine. So remember here, we are dealing with high value assets, could be a domain controller, and you might not want to let the logic app just run through and isolate the DC. So that's an optional step we do here. But obviously, if you're confident enough, you could go ahead and just have the logic app run through and do the isolation. So that is our first scenario, and we were covering how to prioritize incidents using watch lists. On to the next one, which relates to importation of business data. In this scenario, we shall use our watch list to bring in HR-related data so we can monitor for suspicious activity by a specific group of employees. Again, some background behind this second scenario. We have a couple of employees who, sadly, are about to be separated from the company for various reasons. We would like to be alerted on any suspicious activities by these employees around their use of company's information systems. We leverage a custom rule deployed as part of the insider risk management solution. So this comes out of our Sentinel content hub. The rule is based on a machine learning detection algorithm. And now, machine learning-based detections are generally considered to be of low fidelity and typically need more enrichment to increase their reliability. And this is where watch lists can really come in handy. So essentially, the rule looks at recent alerts and incidents to establish whether a pattern exists for users within our organization. The rule will rely on the watch list to increase the SOC analyst's degree of confidence that the alerts are of significance, especially if they are generated against a user that is in our watch list based on the fact that they are currently serving notice. The KQL basket machine learning function is used to identify these patterns, and the function's parameters can be adjusted to increase or decrease the sensitivity of the detections, and we'll see how that works. Lastly, we attach a playbook to an automation rule that will alert our risk management team that activities of concern have been detected relating to employees who are currently serving notice. So this is how the steps to implement this scenario would look like. So SOC engineer receives an automatically generated email with an Excel file attachment from the company's HR system. This Excel file contains a list of employees serving their notice period. The SOC engineer downloads the terminated employees watch list template from the Sentinel portal. They adapt it so that the employee names and other details match the schema requirements of the watch list. They then populate the CSV template with those names and upload it back into Sentinel. Once uploaded, the watch list will then be used by analytics rules to filter generated events. If any events match the user principal name in the query results and the user principal name in the watch list, then an incident is generated. Otherwise, the rest of the alerts are ignored, effectively saving the analyst some time and effort. The automation rule will kick in, send out an email and a Teams message to the risk team, create a ServiceNow ticket, and raise the severity of the incident. Back to the demo. So here we'll take a quick look at where this scenario is based on. So remember, I talked about our content hub. If you go in here, we have quite a bit of solutions prepackaged. So encourage you to go out there and check. But in this case, we use this insider risk management solution. It does come already with some pre-built rules, hunting queries, playbook, and workbook. In this scenario, we shall be using one of the rules and the playbook. So let us go and check out this rule that's associated with the insider risk management solution. This is the one that we are using for scenario high insider risk high user security alerts correlation. So if we jump into the logic to take a quick look in here. So what is happening is that we are looking at alerts and incidents that have been generated against users in our environment. And the key thing, the magic really is happening around here. So what we are doing here is we are saying we want to look at the UPN, the alert name, the severity, and the product name, and see whether there are patterns of similarities across these three fields. And this is the machine learning plugin or function that does this work. And this is where you can adjust it. So at this point, if I execute it, we will get a certain number of results. There we go. If I go back in there and reduce its sensitivity by increasing this number, this outcome should change and we should have less results. So this type of uncertainty is what you want to kind of minimize with this next line here. So as you can see, we are now going out to check out the terminated employees watch list and make sure that if we get an alert that's been generated by our machine learning function here, we want to increase its degree of confidence by looking up in the watch list and checking, do we really have this users in the watch list and should we really be concerned? So if that should happen, then we can go and kick off our automation. So we have a second automation rule over here, which is the insider risk one. And what it does, it is attached to the rule that we just looked at and then performs those actions that we saw in the flow. So it will send out this message and email to the risk team. This logic app is already part of the package from the insider risk solution. And then we would elevate the severity of the incident again using the built-in capability of the automation rule and then create a ServiceNow ticket. Okay, so let me show you how the integration with the UEBA solution happens. So here we've got the incident that was generated by that rule. I will now go over here to the insights button, and it will pull up some UEBA insights. So already you can see from UEBA, we can tell what is, who are the peers that are related to me and what is their rank. Further down here, we get insights related to anomalous activities I have performed compared to my peers. And then lastly, in the focus of our webinar today, you can see automatically the insights get pulled out. And here we can see that this employee over here, myself, is on notice, and there's even a tag of maybe my department and so on. So that is our second scenario. And with that, I will turn it over to my colleague Jing to take us through the next one, which is how we can reduce alert fatigue. Jing, over to you.
Thank you, Innocent. 1 second. Let me share my screen. All right, so let's talk about reducing alert fatigue. So there are going to be times, and I'm sure you're experiencing it, where there are a ton of alerts and incidents being created, and you're kind of overwhelmed. A metaphor I kind of relate to is the boy who cries wolf, where the boy will keep alerting everyone that there's danger,
sorry,
and
Jing,
eventually.
Are you sharing your screen? Because I think it's.
Second. 1 second. Let me try again. Yeah, I thought I was sharing.
Great. That's it. Good.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So basically, there are going to be times when you are sort of inundated with alerts, and you need to reduce these alerts to a manageable state. So what we want to do is we want to use Watchlist to help filter the logs to ensure that we are only alerted on events of interest and prevent these benign events from becoming alerts. We want to create a table that we can use to map or use to reference to filter the watch list against. And we want to create a schedule rule to leverage that watch list to help filter those alerts. So I'm going to show you some examples in doing that. But first, I want to kind of show you the walkthrough of what that looks like. So in this example, we have a SOC engineer. He is going to create a watch list Excel file. Now, in the previous use cases, we referenced a template, but you can also, you don't have to reference a template, but you do need it to leverage the entities and the UEBA features. But you can also leverage some UEBA features if you were to create it. It's just going to be a couple more steps, right? It's not going to be as easy as just downloading a template. But let's say we have some devices and a list, and we export it to CSV, we upload the CSV to the portal, and now we have those sort of devices that we want to allow and suppress those alerts. And in this example, we have pen test lab, the prefix of Linux 01, 02, and we want to suppress those alerts. We want those alerts gone so we can focus on the important alerts. Then we want to generate incidents from those, trigger automation playbooks so that allows us to abstract all that data that we don't want, events that we don't want to get alerted on, and trigger the automation around those workflows, okay? So what we're going to do is I'm actually going to show you how I would create a watch list. So this is going to be something that you can do is you find out what your table is, and then we want to understand what entities are. So what I have here is we want to specify the table. Maybe we want the fails. So we're going to go look for the fails in the syslog, and we just want to summarize it by computer, which we have a list there. We notice that pen test lab is quite chatty, right? And we want to really just filter it and get those other machines. So how do we do that? Well, now you're going to have to take it a step further and leverage the watch list. So the watch list, if I open up the watch list tab here, it's going to take me to these assets right here. I have tagged assets, device owners, and whitelisted devices. I'm going to leverage whitelisted devices. And when I look at that list, it's just 4 devices. Pen test lab, very simple list with a computer column name, okay? Now, once I do that, I need to reference this watch list. So let's just do let whitelist equals underscore get watch list. And then we want to specify that string of that alias for the watch list. So this watch list is going to be whitelisted devices. So I'm going to put that alias here, and then I'm going to run. And just to verify that I'm able to get that, I'm going to put whitelist here. And be sure to put a semicolon. And we have these devices that we are whitelisting, right? And as Innocent said, you need to specify the search key to kind of identify what you're going to be referencing or searching against. So we're using the computer field, Okay, so once we have that, we have our logs, and now we need to filter. We're going to join, and we need to bring that query back in, right? And now we're going to join the whitelist table on computer. The only, if you have separate columns like the custom, this table, right? This table is different from this table. There are two different tables we're going to be kind of comparing. If they have different column names, then you have to do the left and right referencing. But if they have the same column name, then you don't need to do that, and you can just specify the column. So now we have those columns, but as you can see, it's not really what we want. So we want to do kind equals left anti, because we want anything that's not a match, right? So we run this, and then we get the list of computers. We have PC and desktop. All the pen test devices are off. If we do just left outer, then it's more like I want those specific devices, right? So this is going to be the left anti, and we want anything that's not on the list. And then you take this query and you go to your analytical rule, and then you simply just add and build your query out. So you go here, you go into the portal, you build your schedule analytical rule, and you say, this is custom, multiple failed login attempts, okay? And we're just gonna say, let's just call it maybe initial access, and we're going to paste that rule in. And we also want to validate that test data. As you can see, the test data shows, well, some alerts on the right side, simulated the data. So we want to view the query results. And as you can see, this is what we want to see. These are the two machines we want to alert on. So we just want to verify that. And then we want to map those entities. So we're just going to go to the host, and then we're going to specify the host name. We specify the computer, and maybe you want to add more entities later, but we'll go into that later on. And the alert detail, maybe you want to do something custom. You just say multiple login attempts on computer. You're referencing the column name, computer, right? And then we want to save these as well. And then I'm going to set this to just 24 hours. So multiple login attempts within 24 hours. Set these, conditions based off your organization and your strategy. But for now, we're just going to alert. And we'll just put the threshold to say, maybe we want more than 5 events, okay? And we want to group all these events. We want to also group them by device. And I'm going to go a little fast, but we just want to group them by device. And then we also want to trigger some automation. So we're going to do automation, send email. And then if you've already pre-built your playbook, this is where you add those playbooks, okay? And then you can reference those playbooks, okay? And you're gonna have to make sure you have the necessary permissions. So you just click on this little button to manage those permissions and type in the playbook you want, click here and apply, approve it. So you have the necessary rights so that this Sentinel workspace can have the authority to run playbooks in those other resource groups. So now we can reference here, and then we'll apply it. We'll just delete this end. And then that's it. You created a rule that will aggregate these alerts within the same entity, and then you create that item, okay? So that is an example of building it. And once you build it out, I'll show you what happens with the automation. But now that we know about reducing those alerts, right, and getting rid of anything that you don't want to really get alerted on, we now want to enrich that data. Maybe there's additional fields or something that you want to enrich from the telemetry that you want to provide. So there's additional data that you can reference and import, and we can use Watchlist to enrich these event data with additional information to help us understand and provide additional context as well as automation. So here is an example where we have some a watch list, and we have, let's say, production, and we have some machines that are development. Maybe in your ARM template, you're already tagging those resources, and maybe you have owners assigned. Maybe if you've already have a Azure policy that assigns an owner, and anybody that creates a resource is assigned an owner, but maybe you have these tagged entities and components that you want to enrich in that watch list. So these computers, it's going to be something where you're going to reference. In another example, maybe you want to reference state or asset information, whatever it is. Just know that that's data you can bring into your events. So the table we're going to enrich is the syslog table, and we want that computer field to match the computer field in the syslog data set. Then we're going to want to map and bring those additional columns into our event. Okay. There's a reason for that, because once you have that, you can build a query. So remember, we're going to build our watch list, right? By getting the watch list, then we're going to identify the syslog table. We're going to join that watch list on computer. And it only works if both columns are the same. If not, you'll have to use the left-right index. And then you want to summarize count by state, which allows you to build interesting charts and visualizations that you may not build with just syslog event data. Then we can take that chart and stick it in a workbook. Remember, a workbook also uses KQL queries. So now that you have your data, you summarized it, you can put it into a workbook. All right. So in the same example or the demo, I wanted to also add some additional items. So let's use the watch list, and I'm actually going to use multiple watch lists. So now we have our whitelist information, we have these PCs, but we don't have the owner. So let's add some owner information, right? So if I go back into my watch list and I go back into the watch list I have available to me that I've added, let's go to device owner. The alias is device_owner. And basically, it's just a mapping of computers with owners. So if you go into our query and we have our owners, then now let's build the owner list. So let's do let owners equals get watch list. And we do device owners. I think that was the list. Let's double check. All right, so I'm able to query the owners table. So this is a way, if you separate empty spaces between queries, you can kind of have multiple queries and they won't run those. So I'm going to bring these statements back. I'm going to delete owners, and now we have owners field, but we're not using it yet, right? So now we have to join kind equals left outer owners on computer. Now, as you can see, we have our computer as well as the owner, and let's clean it up a bit. We'll do project time. Let's see what we got. Project computer, and we want, what else do we want? We want the owner. So we clean it up, and this is our query now that we're going to use, and we have the owner information. Why do you need the owner information? Well, because an incident owner is not the same as the device owner, the resource owner, but we want to route it to the owner, and we want to send them a ticket. So we're going to take that query, we're going to put it in our analytical rule. I'm going to flip over to an analytical rule that I already have built, because I already kind of showed you how to build the analytical rule. But we already have an analytical rule, and it's the same query, but now we have owner information, which you can map in account, full name, owner, right? You're mapping an additional entity so that we know the host and we know the owner. Everything is pretty much straightforward. One thing I would mention is if you want to group it by owner, let's say you want to roll up multiple devices under one owner and then just have one incident for an owner, then you'll just have to change this to account instead of by host. Whatever you configure here is how it's going to be viewed in the incident window. So now you have this mapped, you have everything good, then let me show you what it looks like. So inside the incidents, I have these alerts called multiple login attempts detected on this host name. all the alerts, corresponding alerts, is going to roll up under that host name because I've grouped it under there, right? You can, again, you could do it under the user, but in this situation, let's go ahead and use this one. And then we're going to run a playbook and trigger it manually. And we're going to leverage that webinar LA email. We're going to run that webinar playbook, and it's going to trigger this playbook. And just simply, it's, if you don't know what logic apps or automation is, it's very low code, okay? And the first trigger is you need to have an incident. That's going to allow it to populate. Then we want to get the entities. We want to loop through those entities, and then we want to send the email to the device owner, right, with some context. I did a option, so I can do yes, no, right, with options. And then device owner confirms incident, meaning a condition that says, based off what he responds, I will do different things. So if I go back into my mail, I get the request for input, and then I see multiple login attempts, severity high. Here's a link to the incident, right? So it takes you directly to the incident to investigate, you know, if this is you. But I'm going to select no, it's not me, right? And if I confirm no, then what's going to happen is in that workflow, it's going to now send the email and then assign the ticket to a incident manager. If I confirm yes, then it would just comment the ticket. But if I confirm no, we'll add a comment to the incident saying the user does not acknowledge this incident. And we want to also update the incident. We want to update and say that the user, we're going to assign it a owner, right, based off your operations, you know, triage and who's on call. But we want to assign an object owner. We mark the severity as high. So we're taking different action based off the response of the device owner. And then now, if we go back into the portal, right, we will see that in that particular, let's see, where did I trigger it? In this particular portal, let's go ahead and view the details. The comment has been commented, say the user does not acknowledge this incident. This was at 9:37 a.m. And then it's been assigned to owner. Okay, so many different actions you can take based off the response of the user. And this is just one example. You can open a, you know, if it's a high severity asset and you've already filtered the events, you can also route it to the security operations. You know, you can route it to the group and have them address it. So many different workflows you can have based off these actions. So as Innocent showed, you can have multiple playbooks trigger, you know, in sequential order. Okay. So what did we go over? We prioritized incidents and allowed you to kind of focus and on particular assets that are of high value. An example could be a domain controller or assets that are more valuable than others so that you can, whenever you're reviewing incidents, it's in the right order. And you also, we also showed you how to import business data and take business context and information and import it into your logs and event data so that you can take different actions based off that. We also showed you how to reduce alert fatigue and suppress those alerts from known sources where these type of events are expected to occur. And also enriching event data, right? You can enrich event data with external sources. An example that we did not show is taking even geodata, large CSV data, and importing it into Sentinel and using that to even find geo information and triangulate these users and where they're actually coming from, and where these logins are coming from, and baseline those. Okay, so go out, try out these scenarios, and if there's any other scenarios or any questions you have, feel free to reach out, give us some feedback so we can continuously improve. But that is it for the webinar. Great.
We do have, the team was great with getting all the questions answered, but I thought we could just go through a few. The first one is there an easy way to create a watch list based off hosts listed as high criticality in MDE?
Oh, Sorry, yes. In Microsoft Defender, if you want to create high-value assets in the Defender for Endpoint, there's multiple ways you can do it. I suggest tag. Defender for Endpoint already has assets already tagged within the Defender ecosystem, the native tagging features. There's a way that you can actually leverage logic apps, what I kind of showed you, to go query those Defender assets and provide and go grab those tagged values. So then you would say, if it's a tagged asset, then you can update, the next action is update a watch list with those tagged assets. Then you use that watch list as a reference table for any alerts you want to map that against.
Great. Next one. Can we suppress RDP incidents related to certain IP addresses or users?
Exactly. So that's another example that I did not show, but it could definitely be achieved. KQL already has natively built in the ability to understand IP subnetting. So you're simply going to have your IP subnet range aligned to the devices. I suggest leveraging DHCP or DNS or a way to understand what those IPs are, identify maybe your VLANs, but mapping those IP subnets to particular network segmentations, and then from there, leveraging a logic app to query against and populate sort of that static list or that table, and leverage that, and then leverage KQL to understand if a device with their internal IP maps to the same subnet inside that watch list.
Great. Next one is.
If I can add something there, that's a good place to add to use the network addresses built-in template.
Yes.
Great, thanks. The next one is, how can we add the custom details which are defined in the entity mapping into the email sent via Logic app?
Going to be an additional entry. When you're in the configurator, you're able to map additional custom entities. If it's a entity that we already have referenced, as an example, that is the device or user or file entity, then it's simply on the dropdown. But if it's something more custom, then that's something you're going to have to customize. But everything is going to be configured through when you configure your analytical rule.
Great. The next one is, could you get the owner information from Intune or Defender 365?
Yes, you can also get the but that would be, it would require a couple steps, and it would be I would suggest via Intune, because devices, the same naming convention would map to Intune that would also correlate to the user or the owner of the device. So depending how your organization does it, Intune would be a really good way to understand that, and then you can just use simple Graph API to get that information, and then map it to a watch list and update a watch list that would have that table, and have it automatically update on a recurring schedule, and then update it so that you can reference it in your analytical rules.
Great. And next one is, how can we create watch lists within KQL?
I think we showed that.
Okay, yeah. Well, I think that's all the questions we had left unanswered. So I'd like to thank Cristhofer, Jing, and Innocent for being our guests today and for an excellent presentation. And thank you to the rest of the team who helped answer questions. At the same time, I would like to remind the listeners that the best way to ensure you don't miss any future webinars or major announcements is to visit our landing page at aka.ms/securitycommunity. And while there, you'll find easy ways to navigate and find the resources and learning content relevant to our security products in their communities. A good start would be browsing our bite-sized product videos, ninja trainings, recordings of past webinars, GitHub communities, and more. We'd love to hear your feedback on how we can improve these webinars. Please take a minute submitting your webinar feedback at aka.ms/security webinar feedback. Thank you, and see you next time. Goodbye.